Welcome to Dynamo's Dozen, the podcast that I bring you each and every single week, where I talk about whatever may be on my mind, from pro wrestling, sports, entertainment, music, movies, muesli, fresh socks and jocks, and everything in between, never forgetting the talcum powder. This is Dynamo's Dozen, and I am your host, Ian Dynamo Kelly, and these two beautiful looking men on my side is Jason Kennedy, my co-host for the day. You know him as one of the four podmen, and of course, the special guest today, one that I've been working on for a number of years, actually, is Big Bill Anderson. Bill, finally, welcome to Dynamo's Dozen.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
You know what, sir? I actually appreciate you taking the time out. I know there's been a couple of nooks and crannies, I suppose, over the couple of years that have stopped us doing it. I've always believed that you get a conversation with a guest or whatever it may be at the right time, and it's always meant to be. And I think this is actually the perfect time, to be fair. So I really do thank you for taking the time out today. So. Bill, this is probably the first time you've talked to an Irish podcast. I would dare say.
I believe so. It is. It is. I have talked to so many different people doing podcasts, but I am for a fact it's positive. You're the first from Ireland, and I'm very proud of that. That's cool. It's very nice.
We're happy to have you, my friend. We're absolutely happy to have you. And while we are here in the thunderous rain in Dublin, Ireland, and you're in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, with just light rain spells outside in January. Bill's gone there for a second there. He was worrying. Don't worry, we continue this conversation. He will be back. So we are back there. We just had a couple of technical issues, so please bear with us. But we are fine. It's nothing to do with the rain here in Dublin. It's all to do with Bill's thunder and lightning outside, as you can see, with that beautiful sunny day that he's having outside. So it's all good.
Yeah, the technology gets better, but the connection remains the same.
Technology gets better, sure. So I suppose the best way to start any show is always at the beginning. And Bill, for people, you're actually a very, very kind man and have been for a long time in the sense of sharing a lot of your information and photos and bits of memorabilia and history on your Facebook page. But for people that don't know your full story in terms of how you got into the business, let's just start it at that for the first section, and then we can grow from there.
Okay. Well, as a teenager, I discovered professional wrestling when I was like 14 years old, watching television in California, watching Freddie Blassie against the Golden Greek, John Tolis, one of the great wrestling feuds of all times in the 60s and 70s. And I was very inspired by those two gentlemen to want to become a professional wrestler. So that was in 1971. I was watching John and Fred wrestle, and I knew that's what I wanted to do in my life.
Sure.
And from California, I moved to Phoenix, Arizona in 71. And 1 year later, a guy named Kurt Von Steiger came to this state to start promoting wrestling. Kurt Von Steiger and his brother Carl had wrestled in Canada, Australia, Singapore, all through the States. They'd worked for the Crockett promotion, Don Owen especially. And so they had been around the country wrestling, and now they wanted to settle down in Arizona and be a promoter. So I started going to the shows, and I was very smart in that I knew I was a very skinny kid. I was 6'1" or 6'2", actually, 140 pounds, very skinny.
And what age were you at that time? So you were like 16?
I was 16, yeah. And I wanted to be a wrestler, but I knew I had to break in slowly. So I learned from the ground up. I started helping Kurt set his ring up in various venues around the state, set his ring up every week, and I got a free ticket because of that. Sure. And then eventually I worked into becoming a referee and a ring announcer for him. Little did I know that ring announcing would pay off for me many years later with the World Wrestling Federation. But I had no idea. I'm still just a punk kid in high school, just a young, skinny kid, very dumb. And so I trained in wrestling, and in 1974, I was able to have my first pro match in Tucson, Arizona, about 100 miles from Phoenix. And my career kind of took off from there, working the independent circuit, working 5-6 shows a week on the Indian reservations, and then back into Phoenix and Tucson. So I got to start like that, just paying my dues, breaking into the business very slowly. And then I met a guy named Chris Colt, who Chris Colt had a little run in England at one time. He was actually a bodyguard for Joe Cocker,
Okay.
rock legend Joe
Yep.
Cocker. I've been to Joe Cocker's grave. He's buried in Colorado, and I've been to his grave, one of my favorite musicians. And Chris Colt was a bodyguard for him. But long before that, Chris was a wrestler. And we became partners and went to Tennessee to wrestle in 1975, wrestling against Jerry Lawler, the Fargo brothers, Don, Jackie, Roughhouse Fargo. And that's how I got a lot of experience, was wrestling in the South, building my name up, even though it was as Bill Colt, not as Bill Anderson. My wrestling name was wrestling as a Colt brother.
And they were
Chris.
tough guys. The Fargo boys apparently had a rep for being some tough.
Yes, they were,
boys,
and it was a very redneck. What we call here in the States a very redneck.
we know.
It was very tough, because in the 70s, when you had long hair and you're wrestling in the South, and I had long blonde hair, bleach blonde. My hair looked about like Ric Flair's in his prime. I didn't have the talent. I didn't have the talent of Ric Flair. I had the hair of Ric Flair.
Well, that's something.
Yeah. And we were building a great reputation in Tennessee, and wrestling hard down there, getting experience, wrestling every day of the week, even 3 times on Saturdays because of various television tapings, 2 on Saturday, and then we go to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and wrestle at night. So getting experience, getting more experience. Eventually, I moved to Chicago, where I broke up with Chris and that tag team, started wrestling for Dick the Bruiser's WWA promotion. This was in 1981. So I'm just kind of going fast through the years, and I get to 81, and I'm wrestling in Indiana, Illinois. Again, I was working a regular job, but I was wrestling 4 or 5 times a week in Wisconsin, all around that area of the Midwest there. And just having fun and meeting people like Sailor Art Thomas, Moose Cholak, Dick the Bruiser, some old timers. And then I eventually moved to California and started wrestling for Mike LaBelle in 1982 in Los Angeles at the famed Olympic Auditorium, which is where so many matches I had watched as a kid years earlier. I was there now as a pro wrestling, Mondo Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, Hector Guerrero, John Tolis. I was wrestling all my heroes. I had stepped up my game a bit, and I was wrestling with these guys. But Mike LaBelle eventually sold out to Vince McMahon, because Vince McMahon was on the East Coast, based out of the Washington, D.C., New York City area, and he expanded in 1983 all across the country. That became the World Wrestling Federation that we know of today, or World Wrestling Entertainment that we know today, which is worldwide. But it started in 1983, his expansion. And I got my foot in the door thanks to Pat Patterson.
Rest in peace.
Yes, rest in peace. Is a great man, a great talent. And also Michael Bell and his front office person, Jeff Walton, both helped me quite a bit get my foot in the door with Vince as an undercard worker, wrestling because when they expanded, they didn't want to bring out 20-man crews to run a show. They'd fly out 8-10 guys, because they were still worried about how they were going to draw. And it wasn't so bad paying 8 or 10 locals versus 8 or 10 of their superstars. So I got in on the lower roster, wrestling every show in Los Angeles, San Diego, Bakersfield, a lot of the various venues, Fresno, through California, wrestling each month. And then eventually in 1988, Lee Marshall, who was the ring announcer for the World Wrestling Federation, quit to start working for Vern Gagne in his AWA promotion as a TV commentator, color commentator. One night, Chief Jay Strongbow, one of the road agents for WWF, comes up to me, and I was in a suit as a standby wrestler, just standing around backstage. And he says, hey, Billy, have you ever done ring announcing? And I said, yes. I said, 13 years ago, in front of 200 people, 300 people, just the indie shows in Phoenix. He says, but you've done it, right? And I says, yeah, I've done it. He says, well, good, because you're going out and doing the ring.
We need a guy.
You're old.
I said, Chief, there's 17,000 people out there. That's different. It's different than 300. And he says, go out there and do the best job you can do. I did.
Would I be remiss without saying that you had more fun that night than you did when you remembered it in front of 200-300 people, and it probably felt easier? No?
Well, I was nervous. In
Sure.
all fairness, I was very nervous. I had fun. It was a thrill of my life that they trusted me enough because, as
Sure.
a ring announcer, there's no retakes.
Sure.
Once you blurt out a name,
we're live, pal.
If you make a mistake, it's all on you. And but I did a great job. I have to do a Barry Horowitz, pat myself on the back. And I did a great job, and I had the job for many years after that in Los Angeles, all the way up to Seattle, Portland at different times, all over the place, even to Denver, Colorado. They would hire me to be their ring announcer because I learned from the best. I learned from Lee Marshall, and I learned from Howard Finkel. Howard Finkel was one of the greatest announcers, the most professional man ever. Yeah. And then going way back, Jimmy Lennon, who was a famous announcer in the movies and on for Michael Bell and things like that in Los Angeles. So I got my feet wet watching them kind of guys,
Awesome.
Learned a lot.
Is there anything you want to ask him, Jay, there just before we move on?
It's interesting. It's
yeah.
I love these walkthrough to wrestling history. I mean, as a business, without a shadow of a doubt, it's the old adage that goes, standing on the shoulders of giants is no more true than in professional wrestling. It's almost like a legacy passed down for people. And like you said,
Sure.
it was funny. There's nothing removes memory or affects it quite as much as standing in front of that many people and having the adrenaline kicks in and you come off and you're shaking. You're like, what happened? Did I enjoy it? And you're like,
you
knocked it out of the park, pal.
One time Nick Bockwinkel was a road agent for the WWF, and he saw me pacing backstage at the LA Sports Arena, and he goes, what's wrong with you? And I go, I'm nervous, Nick. And he goes, then he comes
Honesty.
up close. He comes right up to my face. He says, good. It shows you care.
Yes. When the nerves leave you, you stop having fun. Yeah.
And I never forgot that, because I was having fun and enjoying myself and being paid, but I had to make sure I was the ultimate professional. No pun intended on the Ultimate Warrior.
Hey, we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
I had to be the
you didn't
ultimate
lick it up off the ground.
Yeah, I had. But I tell you a funny story real fast before you ask me the next question.
Of course.
I was doing the ring announcing one night in Anaheim, one of the LA suburbs of LA, and I introduced Randy Savage and Elizabeth, and I go, the Macho Man, and he comes in. And he starts running the ropes, hitting the ropes real hard. He's running all around me, going back and forth. and I'm standing rigid because I didn't want to bounce around because I'm getting ready to announce, I think, Bret Hart, his opponent. And I'm standing rigid, and he comes up to me and he goes, hey, what's the matter? You don't sell for me anymore. And it's like, sorry, I'm not a wrestler right now. I'm a ring announcer.
He was ribbing you. He was ribbing you. I love it.
Yeah.
You know what's awesome about that, and what's great about it is if you're people of our age, Jay's not much older than me, but we are from the same genre in terms of watching that.
We're the same generation as far
We
as
are
pop
with it.
culture
We
goes.
are.
Yeah.
We are, without a shadow of a doubt. And it's great with the WWE network now. You can go and find, like, you can type in Macho Man Randy Savage and you can find Madison Square Garden matches that would have happened at those shows. And you can see Bill either as a referee or either as an announcer.
Well, you could actually, I believe you could find a match I had with Randy too on there because somebody sent it to me. It was a WWF match from San Diego TV where it was Bill Anderson versus Randy.
Cool. And I believe that there's I've seen a couple of matches with you, Bill, as well, where you donned the mask at times as well.
Well, and the reason I was wearing a mask was when I was ring announcing for WWF in Los Angeles, and which is one of their largest markets. Vince didn't want me to show my face and show like, oh, that's the ring announcer out there wrestling. That it belittles the promotion and, it makes it look a little unprofessional. So put me under a mask and, the parts unknown and that whole thing. And I wrestled as the Black Knight or the White Shadow, real creative names.
Oh, so creative. Yeah. What about and Jay, I'm probably asking a question on both of our behalves now, actually, to Bill. In terms of your early experiences with Vince at that time, because we have a show called The Four Podmen, where we like to basically we've got four guys and we like to deep dive into the history of pro wrestling and a certain moment in time. And we've done a 3-part episode on Vince McMahon. So, we started early Vince, mid Vince, and late Vince. So what was your experience with Vince like back in those days, and like what was it like to be around him? I guess
I was around Vince a few times a month from like 1983 till about 1998. It was maybe like say 15 years. Depended how many tapings I was doing or if he would show up at house shows. In all honesty, I always found Pat to be just Vince, very professional.
I thought you were going to say I found Pat to be professional, Vince to be fucking.
I have a Pat Patterson story that's funny. That's why it was on my mind when I start thinking of Vince.
But I mean, that's a good long relationship, though. I mean, you had a proper relationship with Vince McMahon, the man, rather than.
I would bring. See, I had a wrestling school for many years, and I would bring up to sometimes 16, 18 wrestlers to the TV tapings for the pairs of shows that they would do in 2 nights in a row through the 80s and through the mid 90s. So Vince relied on me or his road agents. I'd get a call from Pat, Tony Gurria, Terry Garvin, Rene Goulet. Somebody would call me each month and say, hey, I need you to bring 6 guys, 8 guys, 10 guys, whether it was all the way up to Canada, to Calgary and Edmonton, or, all over the western half of the United States. We never really crossed over much east at all, but he'd send us all the way to Texas, which was a hell of a flight. I mean, just to send us to Texas when there's 1 million wrestlers in Texas, he would still call me and say, or not him, but he would have his guys call and say, hey, tell Anderson to bring me 8 guys from his school, because he knew I had great talent.
Trust is its own guarantee.
I worked hard with my guys and to make sure that they would do a good job and represent me and represent the business and represent Vince and not do anything stupid, go into business on their own out there in the ring and do something silly and get their butt kicked on top of it.
Do it before a SummerSlam. That's always the best way to do it.
But the funny Pat Patterson story, I'm going to tell you, it's real fast. It's Pat was a very big smoker. Pat smoked his entire life, and he didn't care what rules or regulations were in a building. And on Vince's dressing room door, I wish I would have taken a picture of it. He has a sign on his door at all TV tapings. It says, absolutely no smoking allowed. Not that there was any allowed in the buildings anyway, but on his room, Vince hates smoke. Cigarette smoke, hates it. So I can't tell you how many times I'd walk by Vince's room and the door would open and Pat's in there, just a cloud of smoke. He's just going to town like he's going to run out of cigarettes, and it just, Vince let his guard down for Pat. Pat was a very, very loyal promoter.
What was that? What was
Part
that
of the promotion.
relationship like, actually? Because a lot of people, a lot of
Oh,
people forget
Vince,
that, because Vince was super, super loyal to Pat Patterson, wasn't he?
oh, definitely, and vice versa. You didn't
Yeah,
see Pat drifting off to WCW or anything else. He had a job for life, and he knew it. And even through the controversy in the early '90s, through sex, drugs, steroids, all the other, Pat said he was resigning, but he was still part of the promotion through everything.
sure. That was part of the whole Ring Boy scandal stuff
Yeah,
and all that, and
yeah,
then and
yeah,
all that.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
he stayed with Vince, and
And
Vince obviously stuck with him
well,
as well.
because Vince wasn't stupid. Vince knew Pat was a genius.
Yeah.
Pat knew the business inside and out, and you don't ever let guys like that go. And I think he made a lot of mistakes. Vince did through the years, letting guys like, not taking advantage of guys like Jerry Lawler. And his mind, he knew how to promote wrestling. He knew how to pop those southern states and bring in the crowds and fill up every arena he promoted. You can't knock that success. That is
Sure,
big time.
sure.
And Pat was the same way working for Roy Shire in San Francisco. Of course, he had, Moondog Lonnie Main and, Billy Graham, Red Bastien. He had all kind, and Peter Maivia, all kinds of talent around him, Rocky Johnson in the Bay Area. But Pat was a genius, and he was to the day he died. And the world lost a legend. I mean, a
Why don't
ultimate
you?
legend.
Why don't you actually, just in terms of Jay, because we actually talked about this before, myself and Jay, in terms of, I know that Pat Patterson was always known as somebody, like, as a great finish guy, somebody that if you were struggling with say a finish to your match, you could have the most epic match. I mean, Bret Hart always talked about it. You just go up to Pat Patterson and he'd be able to kind of go, right, give me the
Well,
story.
right.
Logic, the pro
Yeah.
wrestling
Well,
logic.
Pat was real old school. And I'll tell you a story. This is the truth. I have no reason to embellish anything at this stage of my life. I'm long out of the business. I don't have to. Who cares?
You don't have to
But I can-
pander to anybody. Exactly.
Yeah, I can tell you this. In 1983, I was put up against at the LA Sports Arena, Paul Orndorff. Again, 15, 16,000 people out in the crowd. I think the main event was maybe Bob Backlund against Ivan Koloff, or it was something like that. And Orndorff was in much better shape than me. He looked great, but he wasn't Mr. Wonderful yet. He was just passing through to Japan. And in the dressing room, Pat Patterson walks up. He pulls me and Orndorff together, and he says, "Paul, put Billy over. He's local. Put him over." Orndorff goes, "Okay. What do you want to do?" And that's the way it was. And Paul was the ultimate professional. And I worked with Paul many times.
Such a great
Orndorff.
wrestler. Such a great
Yeah,
wrestler.
and everybody respected Pat, which is the main thing. Paul could easily looked at me, looked at my body. I was pretty thin still then. I was just athletic looking. I wasn't no big physique or anything. I wasn't fat, wasn't skinny. I was just there. And he could have turned around and says, "Pat, come on, man. I'm a former NFL football player. Come on." But he didn't. He listened, and he took Pat at his word. Pat says, "Put him over." That's what he did. No questions asked.
That's respect. One guy I'd like to ask you
Everyone.
about. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
one guy I'd like to ask you about, because one of my favorite, and Jay, you're probably going to appreciate this question, and Jay, feel free to to improvise here. Roddy Piper.
Oh, Roddy
Do
was
I,
the
do I, do I
sweetest.
even? I don't even need to ask a question, right?
Oh, Roddy was the greatest. I worked on 2 movies with Roddy. Roddy was just a tremendous human being. I shed 1,000 buckets of tears when he passed away.
I know. Yeah,
Him
I
and
saw
him
that,
and
yeah.
Jimmy Snuka both were 2 of my dearest friends. And Roddy was just the sweetest man always. The life of every party, friendly to everyone. I never saw Roddy act like a jerk to anyone ever. I only can say positive, upbeat, great things about Roddy Piper. And what a loss that was, him dying so young of a heart attack in his sleep, in his early 60s, 61 or whatever it was.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Oh man, it was so sad, and Snuka was another one. Jimmy Snuka, I wrestled him in Hawaii. I wrestled him in the WWF, AWA, independent promotions. Many, many, many matches with Jimmy Snuka and Rocky Johnson too. And Jimmy was just the greatest guy to me, just a sweet man, always friendly. Treated my son, who I used to take to the wrestling matches when he was 6, 7, 8 years old. He'd treat my son really good and take pictures with him. And oh man, just fantastic.
how did you feel actually with the and I know, look, correct me if I'm out of place for asking this question, and please do. When you see, the whole Dark Side of the Ring series, obviously with the Jimmy Snuka kind of stuff, because to be honest with you, I will be 100% honest with you, I was never really clued in to any of that kind of
right
story, obviously, until I saw that. So,
well, I don't think anything can be sadder than Nancy Argentina's death in her early 20s. No matter what possible cause it was, her dying that young is just horrible.
Sure.
For what she could have done further with her life.
Sure.
And I think, and I can't put much excuses in for Jimmy. I think in that stage of Jimmy's life in 1983, I believe that was, or 84.
Sure, yeah.
Jimmy was caught up in a world that he was unfamiliar with. He went from making 300 to 500 a week working for Don Owens to making 3 to 4 and 5,000 a night working for Vince. Yeah. And a lot of it became drug money. He got caught up in a world he was not educated enough to handle.
Yeah.
He had no handlers, people watching over him to guide him. And he went off on the wrong side of the track, so to speak, at night when he'd leave the arenas at times. And I think Nancy became part of that damage that happened to Jimmy during that time of recklessness. And that's the only thing I can say bad about Jimmy. I can just say that he definitely made mistakes. And there was cover-ups, and it wasn't just on Jimmy's part. It's on the WWF's part. Sure. He was a major star. They were leading up toward WrestleMania 1 through this period of time, building and building and building this national base with Cyndi Lauper involved and this rock and wrestling. It was all part of the slow build to the first WrestleMania of guys like Jimmy Snuka and Roddy Piper and Mr. T and Hulk Hogan and Orndorff and Bob Orton Jr. and all these guys being megastars. And all the negative publicity would just throw it right in the alley and do them so much harm. And I think they got through it. I heard at the time that it was basically bought off by the judges.
Okay.
It was a payoff involved. Okay. That's what I heard. I could be wrong.
Sure.
This was, we're talking 37 years ago.
Sure. Yeah.
38 years ago.
My age. Yeah. 36 years ago.
I suppose it's one of those things, like you said, when you've got a Jekyll and Hyde existence, when you have a man going from enough to pay his rent every month to enough to live like a king overnight. I mean, nobody really sets out to create tragedy.
And we know drugs are horrible, and I don't know about you gentlemen. I can only speak for me. I've done my share of bad stuff in my life.
You speak for all three of us, Bill.
It's living. It's living.
It's living. Yeah. I haven't done things like that
in
years and years and years, but I admit to it. And I didn't get involved in anything as heavy as Jimmy did. But whatever happened was accidental. That's a fact. It's what he did not do to get it out in open.
Yes.
He needed to come forward instantly instead of getting Vince involved. And
so there could have been a twisted loyalty there involved on his behalf. Like, I'd like it to go away, but I've got to protect the guys who got me out of trouble. It's a messy situation.
Yeah, it was bad judgment. I think that's the bottom line, the key word to it all: bad judgment.
It's not we're not talking about cold bloods or anything here, but we're talking about legitimate twists of fate. I suppose.
It's like the bad judgment when Ken Patera and Masa Saito beat up 15 policemen in Minneapolis. Or whatever.
Good Lord! I want to hear this story.
Well, they went to jail for years. And they not only beat these cops up, they beat them broken bone wise.
Wow.
They beat them to a pulp.
Good Lord.
Men and women. I guess the story is, and this I'm just
Okay, well, I
going
won't
off
laugh
the top
anymore
of my
because you
head.
said women too, so I'm not.
Yeah. Well, I'm going off the top of my head with this, but they went to a McDonald's, I guess, late at night after a show. Saito, who former Olympic wrestler,
Oh, yeah.
no slouch,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
tough man.
Mhm.
And Ken Patera, obviously, it goes without saying how tough he is.
The
and
original
strong.
Olympian. Yeah.
So I guess this McDonald's was closed, and I guess Ken picked up a rock or something and threw it through the window. I say a rock. I think it was like
Boulder.
I think it was
I'm
off.
sorry, but it creates some crazy images in the head. Like it's
I
like
think
something out of Flintstones.
I think the story goes he went to Stonehenge and brought one of those
Yeah.
and carried it across the water and threw it through the McDonald's window.
Don't worry, Saito. I have you.
I think just to explain me brevity and light on the situation. I obviously these are heinous acts, but whenever I hear of a pro wrestler doing something like this, I envision the two boys outside McDonald's in their ring gear just going fucking nuts like some old monster movie.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
if it was nowadays, it would have probably been on videotape, but we're talking I think in the 80s. Oh, we are talking the 80s, maybe 84 or 85.
I think
so. There was nobody out there with their cameras taking pictures and
No.
videos.
Exactly.
But I'd
I
like
guess,
another example. And again, when I hear these stories, I love to try to. It's just years of cop shows. I love unraveling the pieces, and I think what's come to light recently about combat sports, and it's happening in the UFC right now, is if you're in any business where you take a few knocks to the head, back then we weren't aware of how delicate the brain was as an organ.
Sure.
Whereas on hindsight, you look back at all of these issues where men were just fucking clicking like Jekyll and Hyde. You're like, well, we do have medical reasons for this. You behemoths throwing a part of a megalithic monument through a McDonald's for 6 chicken nuggets. But back then, it's easy to say, "Oh, he's bad and on drugs, and that's a good guy. He never did bad things." It's
Well, after they did that, obviously they were wrong in what they did. They handled it poorly, and then I guess the cops came and knocked on the door in the hotel, and one by one they piled in, and one by one they just were put down, and it was backup car after backup car after backup after backup after backup. And it made no difference. Saito and Patera are two guys you didn't mess with. So it was very sad. There was a lot of people hurt very badly. Nobody died, but they were hurt real seriously. And they went to prison for many years to pay for that. But, you're talking about head damage. Well, obviously, the number one man that comes up is Chris Benoit.
Sure.
One of the saddest, one of the most hurtful things, not only to his family, of course, to the wrestling business, because I know every friend I had that was a non-wrestler during that time when Chris did that, came to me and said, wow, what's wrong with you guys that you do this and you kill your wife and you kill your son? I said, I didn't kill anybody. I can only speak. The guy had some illnesses going on. And some problems. This is before we knew the extent of the concussions and things like that. I personally was not a Chris Benoit fan. I had met him for several times through the years. I found him to be very unfriendly personally. Now, again, I know he was best friends with like Dean Malenko and Eddie Guerrero and Chris Jericho and all those kind of guys. That's fine. And I could appreciate it, but I personally didn't find him to be a very nice person.
Some men are very funny about their circles, I suppose. Again, it's you meet some people, but again, even touching back on the tragedy, it's unusual. It's just human nature per se to focus in on the one negative thing in a whole industry.
Oh, sure.
But these same people wouldn't be able to tell you that somebody like John Cena's made 1,500 Make-A-Wishes. You're like, oh, you can tell me about this nasty thing that happened once out of 100,000 performers, but you can't tell me any of the nice stuff either. It's interesting,
Oh yeah, it is, but going back a little bit in my career in 1985, I was sharing an apartment with Red Bastien, and Red Bastien, former Cauliflower Alley Club president and a former AWA World Tag Team Champion. You guys know the history of wrestling, and Red Bastien is a complete legend, one of the nicest men, and one of the great pro wrestlers ever in the business.
Yeah,
And
we had Brian Blair on the. We had Brian Blair, obviously the current, head of the Cauliflower Oil Club, and he mentioned Red Bastien as well as being an absolute legend. Yeah,
no one says there's not a human alive I've ever heard anybody say a negative word about Red Bastien. He's just that kind of guy. He was. Who
do you think Red Bastien's best work was with, actually? Because I've seen a couple of matches. I've seen one with, I'm going to mention Pat O'Connor again because I'm just a fan of Pat O'Connor when I look back at old wrestling. But also, I think I've seen a couple of matches with him with the Lutez, which I thought were pretty fucking
right. Well, I'll tell you a name that comes to mind is the intelligent sensational destroyer, Dick Beyer. I know Red had some great matches with Dick Beyer, and Dick was just one hell of a amateur wrestler from Syracuse, New York, in his prime, in his college days, and then went on to become a real successful pro wrestler. And Red wrestled him many times. I saw some video of Red. Red did this flying head scissors that was off the charts, man. He would run up, he'd have the guy in the corner, and he would run up and do this big scissors and wave his hands in the air, and he'd have the neck scissored with his legs. Unbelievable.
He obviously spent time in Mexico as well, obviously at the time. Right?
Yeah. He was a real high flyer, and Red was great. But Red, when I was living with Red in 1985, he told me that he was going to start opening up a wrestling school and start training some guys. And he said, there's some real big guys. And he says, I want to bring you down to the gym and telling me this and have you beat the guys, because I'm going to have you spend the time in the ring with them. He says, because I can't get in the ring. I got artificial hips. I can't get in and take the bumps that these men are going to require because they're big weightlifting, bodybuilding type guys. So I get down there, and there's 6 guys in this class. Eventually they became the Ultimate Warrior, obviously, and Sting, Steve Borden. And there was another guy, Dave Sheldon, who became the Angel of Death, who was like 6'7".
Sure.
Another guy, Steve DeSalvo, who was a power lifter, about 310 pounds, about 6'2", 6'1". And then there was 2 other guys named Garland Donahoe and Mark Miller. They were just average weightlifters with big arms and everything. So Red says, your job, pointing to me, is to train those 6 guys.
That's a lot of beef.
Well, and I was pretty dumb in those days because I was healthy. I was 30 years old. I was feeling great. I was in shape. I had ring endurance. I could do anything. So I'd stand there and I'd say, okay, Dave, Jim, Steve, all you guys take turns body slamming me. Have them body slam me.
Yeah.
To tell you how stupid I was.
That's that's what you're just throwing your bump card away. Yeah.
So show me how you would do this, and I'll show you how I'm supposed to feel, how the light is supposed to be, or how the technique is.
Yeah.
Because if they're showing it on each other, sometimes they don't get the right feel because it's all up here. You're feeling it.
Absolutely.
The feel has to be right. I wanted to show them as a pro what the feel is, what you should be going through to know if you're doing it right. So I played that game with them. We did this for several months. And eventually, Sting and Warrior, they were being paid. There was those 2 and the 2 other guys, Mark Miller and Garland Donahoe, were part of a 4-man group with a man named Rick Bassman, who was financing. He had no training in wrestling, but he had the money.
Yep.
So he had given Red a substantial amount of money to train these guys. I was given 0 money to train because I was Red's friend, first of all, and Red was letting me live with him free. So I have free room and board.
That's okay, though. That's okay.
Not exactly free. You know what I mean? You were a basketball for the beef.
Well, I'm paying for it now after Red's gone and everything else. My back is killing me.
Just take this money, please.
That's a really cool thing, actually, because I was actually going to bring in, obviously, Sting and the Warrior next, because a lot of people know that Bill Anderson is one of the trainers of the Warrior, and this man to the left, the right, or the center of me is going to be giving you all kinds of questions, because his and he will explain exactly why The Ultimate Warrior is his hero. But you were quite a gentleman because of the fact that people know that the Warrior called you out specifically on his Hall of Fame. So we won't get too far, but we won't get too far in the story and in the narrative.
I'll never forget it.
I know.
Highlight of my career.
Oh wow!
And we will come back to that for you as well, because I want you to have your
as
moment.
much for me.
But in terms of when you look at Sting, and I mean they were the Dingo Warriors, right?
They became
the Blade Runners.
The Blade Runners.
Sorry, my apologies. Yeah.
What happened was,
but that's why Jay should be asking these ones.
about 3 months after their training we were in full gear going with their training, full motion on that. Jim called me, Hellway called me one day, and he says, "Hey Billy, can you meet us down at Gold's Gym in Venice?" He says, me and Steve, we want to talk to you, just the three of us, nobody else, total confidential. And I said, okay. So I met him down at Gold's Gym, and we stood out in the parking lot. And they said, look, we're going to break off from this guy Bassman. We're not feeling this 4-man team thing. They were going to become Power Team USA. Red, white, and blue. I mean, a great concept.
Yeah, pretty cool, actually.
It wasn't. It would have been too new for the business. The business maybe couldn't have handled that. I don't know. Yeah. There wasn't that many 3-man teams. You were just beginning to get the Freebirds, the Road Warriors with Paul Ellering. There wasn't so many 3-man groups of people.
Rock and Roll Express and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, much less 4-man. So it would have been a concept that was maybe too unique.
A very limited concept.
Yeah, because a lot of promoters can't afford to bring in 4 guys. They could bring in 2 at a time, or 3, maybe 1, but 4 guys at a time, that's a major changeover for a lot of. This is during the territory days still.
Well, yeah, like especially like because James E. Cornette, like within Midnight Express, wanted to make sure he was paid exactly like the rest of them were paid as well. Do you know what I mean? So I can see what you mean by that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Steve and Jim was kind of leading the conversation more, and he says, "Hey, Billy, we got 2 directions we can go. Well, 3. He says we can either stay here and let Rick work with us and send us out to wherever he's going to send us as a 4-man team and see if he can get us work. Or Red asked us if we want to go to work in Calgary for Stu Hart, just the 2 of us. Or on our own, without telling anybody, we've sent photos of ourselves to Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett in Tennessee. What is your opinion? What what we should do?" And I didn't hesitate a heartbeat. I says, "Go to Tennessee." The deal too with no offense to Red, but Red was going to take a big chunk of their money going to Stu. Going to Tennessee, they didn't have to owe anybody anything. Nobody got any money from them. They got their full money. I said, "Look, I worked in Tennessee many years before, 12 years before myself. 11 years before." I said, "It's a great place to get your experience. What you need now is in-ring experience in front of a crowd. You know enough gym-wise to get through, but you need to work a crowd. You need that crowd giving you feedback, pro and con.
Sure.
And to work, whether it's $25 a night, it don't matter."
What year would this have been, Bill?
This would have been the end of 85. 85.
So actually, that just thinking about it there, actually, you're correct, because if he'd went to work for Stu, all the great workers had already left, because you had the Bulldogs in WWE, you had the Hart Foundation in WWE, the likes of Stomper, Goldie, and all, they were all pretty much gone. Right. So there wouldn't have been great guys there for them to work with, right?
No, well, and that wasn't even what I was thinking of. I was looking at it a selfish point of view. I was saying, do you guys want to put up with the harsh winter? We were talking, was this September, October?
Your nipples will be cold forever. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I said, you guys are going to be up there at the beginning of winter to get your experience. Do you really want to go through that? Or do you want to go down to Tennessee where it's 75 degrees and wrestle 7 nights a week and get your experience?
And get tan on as well. Yeah.
I said, my advice, go to Tennessee. And that's exactly what they did. And it didn't take them long from there to eventually they split off. And Jim, I believe, is the one who went to World Class, or Bill Watts from there. And Steve did too for a while. Then eventually he went to WCW. All I know is it took them like 3 years and they were both world champions.
Yeah.
When you look
from
at
that point,
this is my last question before I hand this over to Jay, okay? Because this is Jay's moment to talk about the Warrior, because he is like I say, he is an Ultimate Warrior maniac,
little warrior for life, little warrior for life.
For me, in terms of from the analytical standpoint and looking at the work in the ring and stuff like that, what do you think separated say Steve Borden and Jim Hellwig, i.e., Sting and the Warrior? What do you think was the differences?
Steve was a natural athlete. Jim was not a natural athlete. Obviously, Steve could leap. That Stinger splash he did in the ring in the corner. Yes. Just a natural athlete. He was gifted. Jim was just gifted physique wise, probably obviously chemically aided, but again,
weights don't lift themselves.
He achieved a physique that Sting never came close to.
Sure.
But Sting didn't need to, because Sting was more of a wrestler, because that's what his style made him lean toward, that he had to be a wrestler.
So he was more like the duck to water, is what you're saying. Sting was more like, okay.
And Warrior was pampered in a different direction of being a power lifter and a bodybuilder. So those kind of guys are not really made to be wrestlers. They are made to do clotheslines, splashes.
They're strong, not fluid.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. And every promoter, whether it was Bill Watts or Fritz von Erich or Vince McMahon, only wanted that out of Jim Hellwig and demanded that. And he gave him everything he had, and the sellouts were there afterwards of Jim selling out arenas everywhere, setting attendance records. And it's just, and people fault him and say he didn't know how to wrestle. Jim knew how to do arm bars. He knew how to do headlocks. He didn't have to. In fact, he probably would have been yelled at for doing them. Vince probably would have said, "What are you doing a step over toe hold for? Or a figure four?
What are you doing a drop for? What are you taking? What are you going to get in?"
It's basic storytelling psychology. Nobody would read David and Goliath if Goliath had a fucking slingshot too. Like, where's the story there? What are you bringing?
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Look, the one thing that's always bothered me about the man is he had an enigmatic charisma that was far transcended the structured mental thought on the business at the time. It sent it over the top and made it fantastic.
Exactly. And look what he did for people's egos and for their not their ego so much as their morale, building them up. Like always believe was his story. Always wanting to encourage people to be better and be a better person and grow. Yeah. And he believed in that. He did. Just like Hulk Hogan, who always said, "Hey, take your vitamins, say your prayers, treat your parents good." It's great advice. Whether you're doing it all on yourself, to yourself, you're having problems with yourself, you're still trying to give good advice to the public.
Did you ever have any dealings with Hogan? Like, do you subscribe? Because obviously we know that Hogan, obviously they made up near the end. Well, from what we see on the Last Warrior documentary, but like in terms of do you believe that it was genuine? Do you think Hogan did kind of railroad Warrior in a lot of ways, or there was
a lot of guys very jealous of Warrior. Let's face it. I mean, and you especially Hogan. Hogan was for the most part always a babyface for Vince for the most part, and Warrior was. So you got competition there big time.
Yeah.
And then when you had Randy Savage as a babyface, who had so much charisma himself and was a legend.
The greatest, one of the greatest,
Yeah, you had a lot of guys. Yeah, you had a lot of guys. Yeah, unlike Lex Luger, you had a lot of guys that was really competing for the top spot. and for Vince's affection, you know, and where their history was going to go. But the difference is Jim didn't take crap from anybody. And if he felt he was getting a raw deal, he'd walk. And I saw him walk. I booked him. I booked him on a show in Las Vegas for a promoter named TC Martin and the NWC in 1995. And he was supposed to work with Honky Tonk Man. And he didn't like the way the billing was on the sign. And Jim just walked. And it was like, I don't believe in that myself. I'm not that kind of guy. I have no ego. I'm just glad to have my name on the sign.
So do you think the Warrior built an ego at the same time as well? Like that's really the quote.
I think so, but rightfully so too.
But you gotta have one, right? You gotta have one if you're gonna make it.
Yeah,
right?
because if you're walking around in the dressing room, if you're walking around with your head down, you're showing everybody no confidence, you're not happy, they're gonna run all over you. He'd walk around like he was king shit. And people respected him and they left him alone because they knew he was responsible for the house out there, or a big part of it. Not, no one person ever is, but
I think a lot of the pettiness that came, we'll call them his exile years, because we all know that he stood his ground, never gave an inch, and it was the company who came crawling back to him, not the other way around. And that's unprecedented in any superstar.
Right.
But during the exile years, everybody who did a lot of talking struck me as the kind of men who, one, took money elsewhere before they went back to talk shit, and two, never had the guts to stand up for themselves the way he did and get their value.
Very true.
And in the business of independent workers, there's an awful lot of fucking company men towing the company line who, at the end of the day, when they're broken, sick, or ill, get fired with no pension, no health, and there was no wellness at the time. And these are men who are sitting down in front of a camera saying, "Oh, he didn't love the business." Pal, the business didn't fucking love you. What are you going to do for a business that has no interest in your longevity, your career, and your health? Right. You're going to sit there and lie to every other young and up and comer, or are you going to sit down and say, get your worth, save your money, be wise with your head, and look after yourself, because the business don't care?
Right.
Hellwig had that,
Yeah,
he was always honest.
Well, and I can tell you through the years when I was at TV tapings, or Jim was on house shows where I was ring announcing, or if I happened to be a wrestler, whatever, Jim treated me with the utmost respect at all times. Never once did he make me feel like I'm just a piece of crap in his background of his early life. And never, ever. In fact, like when he was in a dressing room once we had this show called the World Peace Festival that Antonio Inoki promoted in 1995 at the Los Angeles Sports Arena, and Bam Bam Bigelow was on it, and Chris Jericho, and all these Japanese and Mexican wrestlers around the show. And Jim was in his own dressing room, and I went in there. I said, "Hey, Jim, do you mind if I I was a ring announcer. I said, "Do you mind if I put my tux on in here?" He says, "No, Billy, grab a chair." And Lex Luger walks in, and Lex, I had known Lex off and on for years.
I was going to ask you about Lex here, because I could tell there was some heat there, because
Oh yeah. And Lex comes in, and Jim goes, "Hey, Lex, hey, this is Billy. He's my trainer." He says, and I shook hands. I said, "I know Lex. How you doing?" I shake his hand, and Lex sat his bag down, looked around, picked his bag up, and walked on out. He wasn't going to change in there. And the same thing, the Steiners did the same thing to me once too. When Steve did it, when Sting did it, Sting was like, "Hey, this is Billy, my trainer." And as is at the old Olympic Auditorium in a small dressing room. And I walked in there, and I had my suitcase because I was wrestling that night. And Sting says, "Hey, Billy, this is Scott and what's the other one's name? I can't even think. Rick and Scott. This is Rick and Scott, the Steiners." I said, "Oh, how you doing, guys, man?" Shake their hand and everything. And then they kind of just like blocked the doorway, so I couldn't even like get in. And I was like, I kind of get the feeling here. I understand. You guys don't think I'm worthy of being in your presence.
So Sting was equally as
he was not totally, but close.
Okay.
He was close, but Jim, without hesitation and reservation, would pose with pictures with all my students, and I'd take the TV tapings that were wrestling on the shows, and I'd say, "Hey, Jim, I need to get a new picture with you with the belt and all that stuff." "Yeah, Billy, come on. And we're taking pictures, and he says, "You got like 10 guys out there. Do they want to take some pictures? They're welcome to. I'll bring them all in."
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Always quick to be a friend and everything. And I never ask Jim for anything. One time, I tell you a funny story, and it just happened recently. Somebody on Facebook asked me, he says, "Did you ever ask Jim to help get you a push or something with Vince?" And I said, "You know what? I never thought of that. No, I never did. I never did, but I wouldn't have thought like that. I would have never twisted my desires around to asking favors of Jim. I would have never done that. I didn't believe in that.
It's called dignity.
Well, perhaps.
One of the great
things.
Sorry, one of the great things that I've seen. I have a friend that sent me a picture. Obviously, the daughter, and I want to mention this because she's coming on the show soon, and she's obviously part of the next season of the Dark Side of the Ring, which is all about Dynamite Kid, who I know you've had, experience with. And Dynamite Kid was actually really, really good friends with Jim Hellwig, which is one that you would never have put together.
It's a very bizarre pairing.
It's a very bizarre pairing. It's a very bizarre pairing. But she said that Jim would come up to the house and just take pictures with, like, in his makeup, in his warrior gear, and just take pictures outside their land and in Calgary. And it's really, really cool to hear, you know what I mean? So it's because obviously Jim was so, protective over his body and what went in and out of it, whereas Dynamite was at that time was probably just like, all right,
man, you talk about a guy. I knew a lot of Mexican wrestlers that were just like Dynamite in that they could go out in the ring and put on 30, 60-minute wrestling clinics out in the ring and bust their butts night after night after night. And then when they're done, when their career is toward the tail end, they can't even walk anymore because
but there was only one Dynamite though, right?
Oh yeah, there was. Dynamite was a legend.
I'm not giving those Mexican boys credit for Dynamite. Bill, come on.
Dynamite was a legend, and it's another sad one that's passed away way too young too. And his last years of life were not of good health, and
no.
I only heard stories, and I saw some pictures here and there of him in a wheelchair or something like that, and it saddens me because I try to remember the guys in their prime and their health and their good.
And what was it like being around? I mean, you were around the locker room back then when the likes of the Bulldogs and the the Heart Foundation were doing their thing, and they were headlining some of the B shows at the time that you were doing announcing, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. There was when you're in a dressing room and you got Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels, you got the Heart Foundation, you got Demolition, you got
good Lord,
Powers and Roma, you got Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, and you got Dynamite and Davey Boy all through the mid '80s, 85, all through that. It was tremendous, man. You were just looking around in amazement. You had Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham, and
like who's who in the future of the business. Like it's where the business is going.
Those were the days, man. Those were the days, And I look back on cards in '83 and '84 that I was on, and I'm in the third, second, fourth match of the show, and the main event is Hogan against Iron Sheik, or Backlund against Koloff, or Pat Patterson against Mil Mascaras, and it's just like the show's loaded. The Samoans against Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas, and all. It's
brilliant.
Like, oh my God. It was like I was so proud to be on those shows.
We've a question. This is a perfect time to ask this question. We've a question from the second in command of the Dynamo Podcast Network that he wanted to ask. Who was your favorite worker to work with? Who's the best worker that you feel you've ever worked with? It doesn't have to be, I mean, for you personally. I know it's a difficult one, yeah.
I'm glad it's after breakfast.
Well, it would probably be somebody you wouldn't be that familiar with. A man named Wildman Jack Armstrong, who was a regional Southern California wrestler for the most part, that worked WWF shows too. But Jack Armstrong was one of the great talents of wrestling from the 70s and 80s era. Also, probably Paul Orndorff. I worked with Paul on a couple different promotions.
How good was Paul Orndorff really? How good? Because I think a lot of people of this era I don't think
Oh,
there's enough appreciation for Paul Under
No,
personally.
there isn't.
Paul was tremendous. Paul was a great worker. He knew the psychology of the business. He understood. He knew he had a body on him that was really a hell of an athletic body.
Oh, good Lord. And then
Paul was
some.
great. Yeah, and another guy I so enjoyed working with was Randy Savage. Randy was just the ultimate, man. Randy was a cool guy.
So when you were working with Randy Savage, can you put this myth to bed, or is it true that every match he had to have it written down?
I cannot say. I never personally saw that of Randy ever.
Perfect.
I can tell you this, that if you ever heard stories that he was protective of Elizabeth, that is a true story.
Okay, give me something on that then. Actually, that's cool. Yeah.
Well, it's only involving Elizabeth. It's not telling the protective part of this. But one night I worked with Randy in San Diego, and Randy got. I went behind Randy, and then we were reversing around a couple of times, and I ended up taking him down. I just grabbed his arm. It was through my waist, and I grabbed him and took him down to like an arm drag type takedown.
Yeah, but then you end up in like a headlock takedown.
And we went around a little bit and had some fun doing that. And when we got back to the dressing room after this is over, there's a big heavy curtain separates the dressing rooms from the fans. And the second I push the curtain open, Randy's there, and he goes, I want to talk to you now. I was scared to death. I honest to God, I thought, okay, my career just ended right now. I'm done for. And he took me in a little dressing room that him and Elizabeth had. It was just a shower, a toilet, and a sink. It's all the room was in this little tiny room, so that Elizabeth could have her private area.
So she could take a poo if she wanted to.
So Elizabeth walks in, and Randy walks in, and he says, "Come on." And I follow him in, and he says, "Shut the door." And I go, shut the door. That's what I sealed my fate right there. I shut the door. There's no witnesses now.
He takes out a gun.
I shut the door. And the first thing he does, he puts his hand out to shake my hand. And I shake it back, and he says, "Thank you." And I go, "Thank you?" He says, "Thank you for wrestling with me and not being afraid of me." I said, "I'm afraid of you now. I'm not afraid of you out the ring."
Those witnesses out there.
And I looked over at Elizabeth, and Elizabeth her face was red. She was laughing so hard. She knew how scared I was. I was terrified. He was going to kick my ass.
So very intense human.
What do you think it was?
Tough guy.
There's an extract here from Dynamite Kid's book that I'm actually just at the finding about Randy Savage. Okay. Randy Savage is the WWF heavyweight champion at the time, and they're going to a bar that happens to have a lot of NWA champions as well. So Dynamite says, Randy comes up to me and asks me, "Will I be his bodyguard for the night? I heard you're pretty tough, kid, and I know you've knocked some teeth out." Dynamite says, "Yeah, well, you're the world champion, buddy. Like, what are you afraid of?" And he goes, "Don't worry about that. Just watch my back." Dynamite says, "Don't worry about it. I'll watch your back." So
that's interesting.
So basically, the narrative of the story is that Dynamite's going like, "What the fuck is this lad being paranoid about?" You know what I mean? Like, because it's like, it's grand. So Dynamite goes up and sees it as an opportunity. Then going, "Oh, I didn't know the NWA boys were there." Goes up and asks Ric Flair to put a word in to the office to get him a job. And Rick says,
funny.
"Oh, your track record isn't great, Dynamite. I don't know whether we're going to be able to do anything with you." And Dynamite's like,
"Oh my God."
Which is Ric Flair telling you your track record isn't great. Like,
I know. But are you imagine?
Words out, you like the party.
Imagine they had to let Dynamite run wild with people like that in that company. That would have been proper wrestling. And you know what I mean by that, Bill, because obviously WCW and down south in Atlanta, they let guys go in. They'd say like, "Hey, you got 15 minutes. Go and show us what you can do." Boom. We seen that on Nitro every week. You know what I mean?
Well, we've said this before about Dynamite, Ian, though. He was the right look at the wrong time. He was 5 years too early.
Yeah.
The crest of his wave was.
Would you
way
agree with
after
that,
him.
Bill?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Dynamite was, he was ahead of his time. He was a hell of a wrestler and good body on him and everything. And he had ring psychology, man. He knew how to work. And that's why Vince wasn't stupid. He raided Stu Hart real quick to get some of that top talent out of Stu's area, out of Calgary. And, which he did to every area. He raided and stole talent. And, well, I shouldn't say stole. He borrowed them
acquired.
He acquired with a lot of money.
Yeah.
When the guys are making per night what they were making in 2 or 3 weeks, then I guess they had to feed families.
Yeah.
Ted DiBiase, another tremendous worker. I mean, all the way down to Terry Taylor, who's taken crap his whole career. But he had a family to feed, and whether it's Red Rooster or whether Brooklyn Brawler, Steve Lombardi. I always said, hey, Steve Lombardi lives in a mansion back in New Jersey, man. Don't think he's just some job guy. He's making
no pity there.
A lot of money.
He saved his money, didn't he?
He's a lifer. Yeah.
Exactly.
Who do you think? Right. Okay. Out of say the 80s wrestling, the golden era, if we want to call it that. Yeah, the rock and roll era. Let's call it that. That would be better. Who do you think is the best and most underrated? I won't say worst because I'm not going to put you under that kind of spotlight because I don't like to say worst because at the end of the day, this podcast isn't about throwing people under the bus. So the best and the most underrated, I think would be a good. Are you happy with that question, Jay?
Absolutely. I want to hear this man's opinion.
That's a tough question. I think Dino Bravo was misused. I think Dino Bravo could have been used much, much better than he was.
Very sad story, yeah.
And yeah. And we were talking about great teams. We totally forget about the Rougeau brothers. Oh my God!
Hey, I don't bring them up for a reason. Come on, I'm a British Bulldog guy. Don't you? Yeah, look at you, Bill. Bill, I know you're trying to work me. I can see you there. Come on.
I think. Unfortunately for all of them,
nobody puts coins in their hands. Nobody puts coins in their hands.
I think. Unfortunately for all those three, though, you have a.
Well played.
And this is not typical or a broad statement, but they were heavily accentuated and in the North American market on television at that time in the 80s when it was very USA, Cold War, Russia, blah, blah, blah. Having an accent meant that you were never going to get this catastrophic. The
Rougeaus were fantastic. They were.
Well, they never lost in Canada even when they were on telly in America.
And one thing that all I can say about the Rougeaus, and I'll tell you, Brahman and Mark Billington, Dynamite's family, all I will say is one thing. They had a hell of an entrance music. We're all American boys. We're the best. We don't like heavy metal. We don't like rock and roll. All we want to do is listen to Barry Manilow.
That's fucking Jim Johnson shit, though. We're talking between the bell, baby. We're talking about success.
No, I have to say, the Rougeaus were definitely great. Yeah.
There's so much talent there.
No question.
You think about guys like Jim Brunzell and Kurt Hennig. Oh my God, Kurt Hennig. You talk about a guy that was perfect for Mr. Perfect.
Yeah.
It really was Kurt. I mean, I hated some of the gimmicks and all that, but because Kurt Hennig was a name all by himself without being Mr. Perfect. But Vince loved to throw that tag on everybody. Dory Funk Jr. came in and he had to call him Hoss Funk. And,
But you can tell the guys who get into it, Mr. Perfect became Mr. Perfect. It was almost like he took a look at the gimmick after about a year or two and goes, you know what? This is going to work out just fine.
Right. And the same with Ted DiBiase.
The $1 Million Man. Yeah.
And
Bill,
Ted
did you ever hear stories about Rick Rude and his problems with Jim Hellwig, obviously, because there's rumors.
I never saw any of those. I was around Rick a lot. I liked Rick a lot. He always treated me very, very nicely. I never wrestled him, but I was on a lot of shows with Rick Rude. I never personally saw any animosity between him. I did almost see a fight one time in the dressing room between King Kong Bundy and Kamala, which was
that's interesting. I'm
I was
into
in-
this. I'm into
I
Who
this.
was-
wins that
I
one?
I was in Tucson. We were doing TV tapings, and I was wrestling on this show. Myself, I had me and Louis Spicoli, one of my students, that's passed away too young. He was only 27 years old when he passed away back in 1998.
Bless him.
Great talent.
Bless
But
him.
Louis and I were sitting in a dressing room, and it was only Kamala and Bundy. And Bundy's sitting in there, and he's like, under his breath, he's saying like, "Son of a god," just complaining. And finally, Kamala's sitting across the room from it, a small dressing room, and he's sitting across, and he goes, "You know what, Chris?" He says, "Why don't you shut your effing mouth, or I'm going to come over there and knock your teeth out." And me and Louie, we were looking at each other like, Bundy's a big guy, man. Who's messing with Bundy? And Bundy just sat there and he goes, never said a word. Never said a word.
Kamala was from NOLA, right? NOLA.
And yeah, so I thought, you know what? Kamala must be a tough SOB because Bundy was right in his place and he just put his head down and never said a word.
He's
Did
probably
you
not
ever-
used to anybody throwing their weight against him when he's throwing his way around and meeting them on the scale pound for pound. Like, is like,
I'll tell you another guy that was great. I was in the ring with several times was One Man Gang. One Man Gang was
Akeem.
yeah. Well, thank God I wrestled him as One Man Gang, and
we're Akeem fans.
very
We're big
nice
Akeem
guy.
fans. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice guy. Same with the Honky Tonk Man. I got along great with Honky, and it just as long as you believe he was the greatest intercontinental champion of all time, you got along great with the Honky Tonk Man.
That sounds about right. Will Ferris, is that right? He was
Wayne Ferris.
Wayne.
Sorry, Will.
Yeah.
Is that a true story that he was actually a cousin of Jerry the King Lawler? Is that actually?
I believe so.
Okay.
I don't think they were very close, though. They were not close friends.
No, he
No.
doesn't like Jerry the King Lawler. He always
There's a
gives him
latent
shit.
animosity there, all right, but you never know when Honky's talking to amuse himself or when he's talking to amuse his audience. He's a hard man to pick up when he's talking, you know.
Well,
I
one's a
agree with
nicer
you.
guy and the other isn't.
Always entertaining.
Yeah.
Oh, he is very entertaining. I was on
I
an
agree.
overseas tour with Honky. We were in Korea, Okinawa, Guam, Japan, all through the Pacific, doing a Armed Forces entertainment tour, and Honky was on the tour. And what an entertainer he is! He's funny as hell.
Witty. He has a dry wit to him.
Who would be? I mean, people like these kind of stories. Actually, Bill. Who do you mentioned? Obviously, Kamala, and ready to destroy King Kong Bundy, and he just kind of shut up and said, "Okay." There's always that famous story, of course, about Bad News Brown putting it up to Andre the Giant because he heard a certain
I
heard a
heard
certain
about
word.
that.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
I don't know how true that is. Of course, I'm only asking the
I
question.
don't know. I don't know about that. Honestly, I had heard it, but the other famous one is obviously Danny Spivey and Adrian Adonis.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Give us
And
that
I
one.
I know firsthand Adonis was a real. Now Adonis, I say all this, but I actually felt we were friends, even though he hurt me. Put 27 stitches in my mouth.
Oh wow.
But he was coked out of his mind one night, 1983. And then I wrestled him again about 8 months later. That was in San Diego the first time, and then in Los Angeles the next time. And I just went up to Chief. I was just flat out honest. I said, "Chief, I can't afford another surgery bill on my mouth. I can't afford to go through the pain. I love the business. I know, blah, blah, blah. But I really don't care to work with Adrian ever again, personally. I just don't trust him. I don't trust his mindset." He came into the dressing room that night and he was drunk. And Heenan was managing him, I think then. And Heenan, I looked at Bobby, who I've known for years and years, and said, "Bobby, what am I going to do?" And he says, I don't know. And Chief said, "Billy, Adrian's advertised on the show. You got to go out there." And I went out there and we did our match. Adrian didn't hurt me that night. He never even took his ring jacket off. He went up on the top rope and came down with an elbow off the top rope. And he was so out of it. He probably didn't even know what city he was in. But I can't tell you this. I saw Adrian just months before he died in the car accident. He was back home in Los Angeles. He lived in Bakersfield, about an hour north of Los Angeles, with his wife and kids. And we both auditioned for a television commercial together. And I saw Adrian for the first time in, about 5 years maybe. And Adrian was straight. He had lost some weight, a little bit of weight. And he said, I'm supposed to go back and work for Vince this fall. And I'm getting my life back together. I'm off the drugs. I'm off the drinking. I haven't done anything in a long time. And he looked it. And we both auditioned for this commercial. And then he went just weeks later and died in around July of '88 in that car accident up in Newfoundland, Canada, with the Bear Man and the Kelly twins were involved. And 3 out of 4 guys in the van died. So, I think Adrian was working on his problems. He's another one that got caught up in it, going from making, a few hundred a week type thing to making thousands a night.
Yeah.
Working WrestleManias, working pay-per-views, all that stuff, making 50,000 and all this, and a night, on a pay-per-view. He'd never seen money like that. And just like Snuka.
Well, Dan Spivey still looks like he would hurt you though.
Well, yeah, it's deceiving. I mean, I was never a kind of guy ever to mess with people. I show people respect. I never believed in.
You can tell.
It's easier
You
being
show
nice.
how tough you are and all that.
No, you don't have to remember who hates you when you're nice every day.
Hey, look, that's it. And I always said, if you think you're that tough, you guys should just have joined the UFC. All the guys that think they're so tough. Yeah, when you're given a body and I'm standing there like this, it's easy to punch me out. But just treat people with respect and dignity.
Yeah.
And I always treated Dan very nicely. And but when I heard the story that Adrian, that he was trying to pay Adrian back for being bullied, he had bullied so many guys. Adrian had, and I was one of them. I could relate to what Spivey just pounded the hell out of him. I mean, I could relate to it. And you can't be a bully all your life. And Adrian was a big, strong guy and didn't know his own strength at times, never a bodybuilder really, but he was a big guy, that barrel chest on him and everything.
Yeah.
Spindly legs, but man, he carried a lot of bulk and strength. And he hit me in the mouth one time when he was drugged up in the ring. And I mean, I was just gushing blood. All the fans were yelling, fake blood. And I was like,
the doctor's bill aren't fake.
Have you any good? Have you any good Billy Jack Haynes stories?
I got along good with Billy. Billy, I worked some shows with Billy. Well, WWF shows, of course, but with the UFC,
WF.
No, UWF. You're right, Herb Abrams. Billy Jack was on those shows. Yeah. And
I'm glad I brought you on, Jay.
You were supposed to be the historian. I'm the fan.
Yeah, but I said the same thing. You said it before me. That's why I was like, okay.
Let me tell you a Steve Dr. Death Williams story in the same vein, because Billy Jack was in the dressing room, but this night in L.A., the referee had screwed up a match. The referee was not smart. He was just a mark. The promoter, Herb Abrams, was just a mark too.
Yes.
So he hired a mark to be his referee. And Williams went to use a chair on Paul Orndorff in the main event on this TV match. And the referee ripped it out of Steve's hands. So that was bad enough. And then there was a little melee in the ring and they had to compensate for not having a chair because the referee took it. But in the dressing room, but we got back to the dressing room and I was standing there and Steve Williams was just kind of pissed off. He just said, "Hey, brother, what'd you do that for?" And the guy goes, "You know what? I did it and I'll do it again. Don't you ever pull that crap like that in the ring." And the referee got up into Steve's face, and I'm talking about as close as I'm getting to my phone right now to Steve Williams.
This doesn't end well.
And he says, "You want to make something of it?" And everybody in the dressing room is looking at Steve like, "You asked Steve if he wants to make something of it, a referee?" And Steve took one step back and he just says, brother, just leave it alone. Let it go. Let it go. You messed up. Let it go. He didn't use messed up. He just said, you messed up and let it go.
Yeah,
And the guy goes,
messed
no.
up. Shut up.
The guy
son.
says, no, you want to make something of it? Let's go. And Steve says, I don't have time for this shit. And Steve, with his left hand, was at his waist, just went boom and punched the guy one time, and blood splattered all over my shirt because I was like 3 feet from it. And everybody around got blood splatter all over their face. And the guy was not cold. The blood splattered and the guy just went. And that was a left jab, just a jab.
It's still real to Steve, damn it.
This was 1990. Steve was in his prime, man. He was a big, strong ox of a man.
It's crazy what they did to Dr. Death, isn't it? With the whole brawl for all bullshit. You know what I mean?
Because
obviously
that was the worst thing that ever could have killed the business was doing that whole stupid gimmick.
Yeah, it is, because it was one of those things as well where the brawl for, we're not going to spend too much time on it because it doesn't really warrant our time, I don't think. But
it's rare in wrestling where nobody wins.
Nobody.
Not even the winner. He lost the most.
All it was a career shortener for every single one of the guys.
Everybody. Yeah, it was.
It's crazy. I mean, even the guy that won it, what was his name?
The smoking gun guy.
Barry something. But yeah,
Bart Gunn.
Bart Gunn.
Bart Gunn. That's Bart Gunn. I mean, that poor guy. I mean,
it's like nobody respected him after he beat everybody.
Oh,
so it's like, what good does it do?
And then he goes.
Why did nobody else book him? Like, he's a hot ticket. Fucking book him.
They put him in the ring with Butterbean, and Butterbean is obviously gonna knock him out. We know this. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, put Butterbean in with Mike Tyson and see what happens.
I can guarantee you, Pat Patterson did not come up with that idea.
No, that's Vince Russo. Yeah, that's a Vince Russo show. Yeah.
It was bullshit. Like I said, it's very, very rare in the business where everybody involved, including the audience, loses. Nobody won.
I had forgotten about that. A lot of it, but when I watched The Dark Side of the Ring, it refreshed my mind, and I was like, wow, this was as bad as I remember.
And you know, the funny thing is, I like Vince Russo. Like we're friendly. You know, I want to like the guy, and it's like, you're right, Bill. I see that as well, and I kind of looked at my partner, and we looked at it, and we went, yeah, that really didn't make sense at all. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, good Lord. You know what? In kind of wrapping this up, Bill, we're gonna quick fire through some guys, and then we're gonna get to the main event, of course, talking about how you did get your Hall of Fame moment as well, which I think you deserve.
Absolutely,
and, you're definitely getting that on this show. I can guarantee you that.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, absolutely, sir. You're a gentleman, and I love you and for everything you did for the business. Couple of guys, let's do a quick fire round. Okay, first person that we need to talk about, Ernie Ladd.
Oh, Ernie Ladd, what a tremendous talent, big man, great worker, great football player, and he became a great evangelist, preaching the word of God. And I know this firsthand because I attended several events with Ernie across the country.
Sure.
Just literally months to years before Ernie passed away. I was sitting in New Jersey at an airport, and Ernie's reading the Bible to me, told me to sit my fat butt down on the ground. There's no chairs anywhere to sit. He says, sit on the floor. And I sat on the floor, and that 6'9" guy pulls his Bible out and just starts reading passages to me. Yeah. That's something you don't ever forget, because I saw Ernie wrestle. He was a big, strong man. Tough.
I don't think I've ever watched him wrestle, but sorry, Ian, but I have heard a few of his interviews, and he had a cadence and a vocal delivery. He could be reading the menu at McDonald's, and you'd say, fucking listen.
I would agree with that. He had a certain vocal tone as well.
Yeah, it was a charisma,
natural charisma.
Very much so. Yeah, great talent, man. The business had a great guy in him.
Superstar Billy Graham.
Oh, one of my true dearest friends here in Phoenix. He's going through a lot of health problems now. He just had one of his toes halfway amputated because of diabetes. And just a couple days ago, in fact. And Billy's a very good guy. Before this COVID hit around the world, I would spend more time with Billy. I would sit and have lunch with him almost every week. And we would sit for 3 hours and just shoot the shit and talk about the business, talk about guys we hated, guys we loved. And Billy would talk very fondly of one of the greatest guys ever was Nick Bockwinkel. We both loved him. But Billy also loved like Lou Albano and Bobby Heenan and the Grand Wizard, Ernie Ladd, Dusty Rhodes. And Billy was very fond of those guys. And I agreed with him with my time around them, not to the extent of Billy's, but I loved being around those guys. Great memories, great workers in an era long gone of characters like Dusty Rhodes and Andre the Giants and Ken Pateras and things like that, those kind of guys, and Ivan Putski and really good friends of Billy's. But we would sit and have lunch for hours. Loved our lunches. And right now they're curtailed because everybody's afraid to go out and have lunch in public anymore and blah 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 blah. And sure. Billy's having health issues and he can't be around a lot of people right now because of his immune system.
Another pioneer of charisma and another man who just before the televised era, I think every hand that made it major in the business took a lump out of Billy fucking Graham and said, I'm having this piece. And the man was just cast to the wind and made 10 to 15 men famous purely because he was on the ball before anybody knew it was sport.
Sure. Yeah. Everybody stole his dialogue and his tie-dye and everything else. It's like
all of it. Everybody took a piece.
And guys like Jesse Ventura, Billy will call him. He won't even return his phone calls now,
Jesse Ventura was actually one of the guys that I had on the list here as well.
Yeah. I personally, I got along great with Jesse. I did the ring announcing for a TV show that Roddy Piper and Jesse did together called Tag Team. I was the ring announcer in the ring, and the wrestlers, they were at the LA Sports Arena. They were wrestling Pat Tanaka and Akio Sato as the Orient Express with Mr. Fuji as their manager, and I did the ring announcing. And that was back in 1991, I believe, or 90 or 91. And I was around Jesse a little bit here and there. And when he was doing commentary for Vince, I was around him a lot and always treated me personally very nicely and good guy, and very inspirational. He shocked the world being the governor of Minnesota, and
yes, absolutely.
We shocked the world.
We shocked the world. And then, of course, we had Donald Trump, who was 1-0 at WrestleMania, but we won't get into that.
Yeah. It's kind of a sour name right now.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm like, I'm not,
Yeah, next.
But then again, you know what? We there's still free speech where I'm from. So
look, one way or the other, there was a Hall of Fame ring sitting at the biggest, most important desk in the world, and regardless who was wearing it, that's something that I never thought I'd ever fucking say in my life. Like, regardless of his tenure, that ring was worn in the ring by somebody who got in the ring, and that's
hey, there'd be no WrestleMania without Donald Trump. So hell, that's why I love the man.
Oh, we'd have had it. We'd just be a few numbers back with a smaller
audience.
Yeah,
we'd be a few numbers back. Yeah. But he definitely. We certainly would have been slow on the uptake in WrestleMania weekends and stuff.
Didn't Trump shave Vince's head once?
Yes,
yeah, the billionaire match.
I'd say you enjoyed that very much, Bill. I'd say you enjoyed it.
That's great. Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
It's time for the main event. Ultimate Warrior's Hall of Fame speech. Obviously, still one of the most eerie weekends in the history of professional wrestling. And this time for the right reasons, even though somebody passed.
Well, who I mean, how many guys have ever done a Hall of Fame speech and literally wrote their own obituary as they're talking and talking to the crowd and acknowledging the wrestlers? Ted DiBiase out there that he potatoed over and over, or Hulk Hogan, or all the guys that he felt he mistreated in the ring at certain times of his life, and apologizing for them, along with Vince and everybody else. He wrote his own eulogy, not realizing that like 72 hours later he'd be dead.
Yeah.
It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life, and saddest when you see his wife and his little girls. And uh, um, I know, when he took the time, and then for me to even think that I was on his mind in his last days of his life, his last hours of life, it means the world to me. I just shocked. You know, that's the kind of guy Jim was, though. I mean, in a way, I'm shocked, and in a way, it don't surprise me, because Jim was, in his own way, he was very down to earth, despite the look of having the ego of God Almighty at times. Jim was a real nice guy, and he really certainly remembered his friends.
You
And
know, I done this little trick, and I kind of tricked my girlfriend into this on Christmas Day. I was like, well, it's a ritual with me and Jay, who you see on your screen here. I said, it's a ritual. We always watch this WWE documentary, the right documentary, the proper one. We always watch it on Christmas. And she was like, okay, I'll watch it with you, because I promised her that I'd watch some sort of Disney movie or something like that, later
Trade
on.
off,
But,
some fucking trade off.
I was like, you know what? That's a good trade for me. I will take that deal. And you know what? I raise you. So, one of the things I noticed when you see Jim go into Triple H's office, when he goes into the office before just there's one thing that stood out to me, because it's like me. I'm a big child in a lot of ways still. I like my collectibles. I like having my stuff. You know what I mean? And you see him, like, Triple H is talking about business, and he goes, "Oh, cool, man. I just want to look at some of your stuff." And he's like a big kid. Is that how he was, Bill? Like, was he like a big kid in some ways?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think he was. The times I was around him or talked to him in his, in his last years, I got a ring built for him. He opened up a wrestling school here in Phoenix. I was living out in California at the time, and he called me and he says, "Hey, I don't know who to go to get a ring built. Can you set me up with a guy?" And I set him up with a guy, and he had a ring built. The guy transported it to Scottsdale outside of Phoenix and put the ring up for Jim at his Warriors gym. And I guess he had a really big gym. Never had a chance to go there at the time. But Jim was always a friendly guy and nice, and just real down to earth, just a hell of a good guy. I can't say anything bad about him. I never saw bad episodes with Jim. I never saw him mistreat people personally. And whether he had run-ins like with Rude or others, it's very possible. I mean,
I think those are the stories of other men told through the mouths of dead people, to be honest with you.
That's
it
also
could very well be a lot of times. Yeah, a lot of times those are done like that. And
that's fair.
Yeah. And let's face it, we're all green at some point, and we make mistakes in the ring. Jim was no different than anybody else. The promoters were using him left and right in a great position, and there was a lot of wrestlers very jealous of him, because he was of limited experience when he began getting these big pushes. So
12 fucking years to the top of the mountain. Unprecedented. Unprecedented.
Yeah, exactly.
If there was nothing there, you don't make it that far. Like,
exactly. Guys like Ted DiBiase, they busted their ass working indie shows and everything to make it to Bill Watts, and then gets taken away to Vince and all this. And then there's other guys that just in a couple of years get popped right up into the main events because they had it. And that puts a big pressure on them. And the guys underneath them are very jealous. You got guys like Paul Roma and Jim Powers, who had excellent physiques on them.
Yes.
But they couldn't get above a certain level at all. It didn't matter what they did, and they were never going to be above a certain level. Where if they were working indie shows, they'd be the main event because of their body. But when you had Vince at that level, and you had Savage that looked great, and you had all the.
What do you think in the later years, because you were still around there? What do you think that like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart had that made them be the next kind of generation? Just because you mentioned there Paul Roma and Jim Powers.
I think Vincent went back to wrestling ability. Those kind of guys could do the 60-minute matches.
Sure. Okay.
And have it. I certainly, I want to state categorically, I disagree with Brett's mentality at whatever that city was in Canada, what the Montreal screw job.
Whatever that city was.
Whatever that city was. You drop the belt, you leave your promotion clean, and forget your ego, forget the fact you're Canadian and you're in a Canadian city. So what? You got a long career back behind you and one ahead of you, unless you wrestle Goldberg, and
sure.
So you got a long career. So what's the matter? One match. The fans aren't going to hold you to that one match, but now they do.
Do you think it was just a great game plan by Vince that it had come to a point that he had played two people off each other so badly that it was like, the two boys should have got together personally, right? And just went,
yeah. Well, the problem is, kind of, Sean was an asshole back in those days.
Yes.
Yeah.
Two manipulated egos. Vince has never
that's
had
what I mean.
two men.
That's what I mean. Like, it's like one is not willing to return the favor and promises the other person that he will never return the favor. So you can kind of see why Brett is saying, no, fuck you. I'm not going to do it for you either.
It's like, the thing is, they hated each other so much. I just wonder if Vince wouldn't have been better off just, having the match lost in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Yeah, I think he got what he wanted.
Non-televised.
Listen, I think Shawn Michaels could have literally slept with Stephanie McMahon back then as well, and it wouldn't have been a problem. You know what I mean? I think Vince probably would have been jealous of that. So
it was just bad times. It was bad.
Yeah, you would. He's a heart man. I'm a Sean man.
I'm a heart man. Yeah.
This bickering is, forgive us, it's not you, Bill. This bickering has.
They were great workers. There's no doubt. And hey, let's face it, Owen Hart goes right into there too. Great workers and everything that were just, there was no big guys. There was just an era there that changing in the 90s there. That
for the better, in my opinion, as well, because
here's an interesting point.
You had less heart attacks, you had less kind of deaths as well. But then, unfortunately, as you kind of alluded to earlier, Bill, even though some of the guys that may have been, big steroid heads, okay, you had guys that were coming off the steroids but still couldn't necessarily come off the recreational drugs. And that was obviously a really big thing as well. And that's why we saw so many deaths in the 90s and the 2000s. Yeah.
Well, right. And you got to remember too, in the 80s and early 90s, mostly in the 80s, Vince wasn't drug testing like he eventually did. The guys could come into the dressing room stoned out of their mind, and they would still be told to go to the ring and work. Where now you'd go through so much scrutiny to get to that spot where everybody would say, "Oh God, no! Way too much people are going to notice you. You're going to get caught, and the media attention will be overwhelming." But again, that's because of our cell phones and the way internet is now versus those days. And
a much smarter audience as well. We kind of notice things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's just a different business and everything, which is one of the reasons I don't follow it as much now. I mean, I still love to look at the pretty girls, the women.
Yeah, you're a big fan of the women, Bill. I notice every day on Facebook you always like to post a pretty girl,
and that's what my ex-wife will say too. I was a big fan. Big fan of the women.
Listen, I think the biggest tribute that we can give you is that you were mentioned in the Hall of Fame, and again, your name should be mentioned in the Hall of Fame. And personally, I still think it's the best Hall of Fame speech of all time, and I don't think it will ever be ever.
It's the greatest final chapter in a man's life in the history of the business ever. And the fact that he got up on stage after 15 years of suffering, petty bullshit to humble every fucking eye, ear, and mouth in front of him, done it the right way, from the hot dog stand to the man who trained him, in one swoop, in 1 hour, put the world to straight, put the story to fucking straight, and put the whole thing to bed. It was a perfect, succinct ending.
Do you believe? Do you believe, Bill, that he knew what was coming? Do you believe he knew? I mean, I'm just asking you. I know. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
I don't believe so. But my God, what timing! It's just hard to fathom what happened and how close it was to it. All of it. I mean, it's not impossible. Maybe a doctor said, "Hey, there's some issues going on that we need to let you know about, and time is limited." I don't know. I honestly don't know.
do you believe that possibly because the heart was so weak as well? Because don't forget, it was a bodybuilding man you're talking about. That weekend was just so overwhelming.
That very
And
well could be. That
you
very
know,
well could be.
I kind of subscribe more to that narrative. That I think that it was a
Uh,
case that. But I mean, look, sorry, Jay, you're more than welcome to come in after that. I just wanted to mention, regardless, at the end of the day, we're speculating over a man that passed, and at the end of the day, the most important thing is that he actually got to make peace with himself.
Very
yeah.
true. Very
Before he
true.
met his maker, you know.
Very true. That is exactly correct. And I think if anything can come of this, Jim died happy.
Yeah.
And he was with his wife in the parking lot where he had his fatal heart attack of a hotel. And I guess he was with his family, and I think that's the way he would have wanted. It was peaceful. If there is such a thing of passing away like that,
Sure. Sure.
Roddy Piper died in his sleep. Road Warrior, Animal, and Hawk both died in their sleep.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost a, I don't mean to sound bad here, but there's almost a beauty about that, isn't there? Like that, it's not pain, it's not, it's like these men deserve to go peaceful,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
some great guys. I'd been in touch
Yeah.
with Animal just, literally a day or so before he passed away. He was
Oh
very
wow.
vocal on Facebook, and we had very similar political views, and that's how I would stay in touch with Animal. And Hawk, back in 2000 and was it three? 2000 whatever, 2000 whatever it was when Hawk passed. He was a great friend of mine too, and great friend of Billy Graham's too, and extremely sad when Hawk passed, and um, just they don't make guys like that anymore. So much charisma, and, heart for the business and everything, and great guys, great talent.
Why don't we finish up with some plug-in, my friend? Because you've got some, as much as your stories are great on a podcast, you've also got stories to go with pictures as well, because you've actually written many books, and
Yeah,
you've got a lot of books.
I've done 3 books so far. I only have 2 that are for sale because my first book, through a problem, I've lost the rights to my own book,
Oh
to
wow.
my own publishing. I can't get copies of my own first book, which had stories of Jim Hellwig in there. It was a story of my wrestling school. It was called Big Bill Anderson Remembers the School of Wrestling.
Sure,
And
which would be
my
great actually.
yeah, and my second book is a book dedicated to Road Warrior Hawk and Red Bastien and the Sheik and Jack Briscoe and Freddie Blassie and Macho Man and Boss Man, the Crusher and the Bruiser and Bruiser Brody, one of the great big men talents.
One of the best of all time. Yeah.
Big John Studd, one of the nicest men I was ever in the ring with. And on the back, various wrestlers: El Santo from Mexico, the Fabulous Moolah, one of the legends of lady wrestling, and Dr. Jerry Graham, the Fabulous Kangaroos, Don Kent and Al Costello, and Luke Klein and Red Bastien and Don Ross, bodybuilder, wrestler. And this book is a tribute book to those wrestlers that I wrote about, that I was in the ring with, or I shared memories with. And so that's that book. My last book I did was a tribute to luchador wrestlers from Mexico. A lot of wrestlers I was in the ring with through the many years, and just lineup sheets and photos of me in the ring with them, and just various photos and stories on these guys, these characters. I had a lot of respect for the years I spent wrestling in Mexico, and I have more books in me that I want to write. I just have been real negligent, kind of finding the motivation, I guess, to continue on at times. I just, that's all. I love the old business, love the old guys, the talent, and need
It's
to follow up.
important.
And people
I need to,
people can find those books as well, of course, on
yeah,
bigbillanderson.us. That's obviously where they can go and
yes, yeah,
go
and
and buy some of those books as well.
yeah. Right now, I'm having a problem. Unfortunately, for guys like you, I'm having a problem with shipping to Europe and to Ireland and places like that, because the cost of shipping is so expensive. I do free shipping in the United States, and I only charge $20, and the book comes autographed. Actually, this
I have
book,
lots of friends over there. It's okay. My sister lives in the United States as well, so we'll just get you to ship it to her, and she can ship it to me.
Home post.
Something like this.